Surprise! Nintendo announced a whole bunch of Mario-related Game Boy games on March 10th, because it's Mario Day, of course. While it doesn't include any of his more traditional adventures, this newest update does give Nintendo Switch Online subscribers a chance to experience the puzzle game favorite Dr. Mario, as well as Mario Golf and Mario Tennis. That's cool and all, but are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Nintendo Power, Computer and Video Games, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So get those pain pills ready, because Mario is going to get a real workout in this sporty episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Alrighty, it's Mario's turn! Uh-oh, Game Boy fall off! Okie dokie, here we go! Mamma mia, that's some
Mario Golf on Game Boy Color.
Get into it.
Between their incredible work on the Hot Shot series and Mario-branded titles, Camelot is the master at making fun and extremely accessible sports games that anybody can get into. That's going to be something that's proven multiple times in this very episode, starting with Mario Golf, the handheld companion to the Nintendo 64 game of the same name. Here we have a surprisingly big and sprawling golf game in the style of NES Open Tournament Golf, complete with Mario-centric courses and hazards. With a great cast, exclusive modes, and even the ability to transfer data from the Game Boy Color to the Nintendo 64 and vice versa, this was a stacked release that didn't feel like a downgrade of its 64-bit counterpart. You definitely saw that reflected in the reviews, where even the lowest magazine score is still pretty damn good. Giving it an 8 out of 10, Electronic Gaming Monthly called Mario Golf a really good title. Besides rock-solid physics and top-notch gameplay, the RPG elements are enough to push it into the must-buy category. Most of the adventuring involves golf challenges for points and info gathering for the big matches. Two-player Link is a blast, as are all the regular modes. Golf fan or not, go get this competent game. As it turns out, Game Informer liked the game a little bit more, giving it an average score of 8.75 out of 10. That's pretty much the same score that we saw over at Nintendo Power, who really enjoyed this Game Boy Golf game. Scott called it one of the best games so far on the Game Boy Color. The golf is excellent, and the game design adds depth and replay value. Jason said that it was on par with the excellent Nintendo 64 version. Who knew there were so many shades of green? Andy called it a golf RPG, though Sonia did bring up one minor gripe. The putting is pretty tough. Now, in order to find the highest score, we're going to need to take a flight all the way across the pond to the UK. That's right, Computer and Video Games gave Mario Golf a perfect 5 out of 5 when they reviewed the game in their 218th issue. With 4 courses and 10 different characters to beat, Mario Golf is a big game. Amazingly, it'll save your best shots for you to view again and again, and is even fun enough to suck in golf haters for hours at a time. It's an absolute masterpiece, and you should move heaven and earth to get your hands on a copy. Thankfully, there's no need to move either heaven or earth now that Mario Golf is part of the Nintendo Switch Online library. All you really need to do is subscribe and play this fantastic golf game. "15 years after Nintendo wowed console players with an impressive, albeit rudimentary tennis game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, they followed it up with a Mario-branded sequel on Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Color. We've already covered the 64-bit version of Mario Tennis, so here we are looking at the technologically inferior but still great Game Boy Color version, which proved that the bits don't really matter. You can make a great tennis game on pretty much every system. And best of all, this wasn't even a downgraded port, as this portable edition features a cool role-playing game mode as well as other extras not found in the Nintendo 64 version. All this added up to a game that critics simply couldn't resist. In fact, the game was so well received that the lowest score I could find was a 4 out of 5 from Computer and Video Games. They loved the characters and the modes, but took issues with some of the gameplay. What stops this game from being a classic is the control system. Having to tap combination of buttons can be awkward, and while there are loads of moves to perform, they just don't feel as intuitive as something like Virtua Tennis. However, this is a great achievement on the Game Boy, and there's more than enough here to keep you playing for months. Believe it or not, this isn't that far off from Electronic Gaming Monthly, which ended up giving Mario Tennis an average score of 8.3 out of 10. Dean argues that the repetitive nature of tennis wears thin on the Game Boy Color. The small digital pad and constant back and forth does a number on the old thumbs. Yeah, it's a pathetic complaint. But that's the only thing wrong with this game. You won't find a better tennis game on the Game Boy Color. Craig also liked the game, making special note of the RPG mechanics. The game is instantly addicting and easy to learn. Its challenging mini-games and RPG-like upgrading and characters give it a unique feel, much like the Dreamcast Virtua Tennis. When you add in the Link multiplayer and the transfer pack capabilities, this is not only one of the best Game Boy Color sports games, but one of the best Game Boy Color titles, period. A must-buy. There are higher scores, of course, like the 8.75 out of 10 that you saw from Game Informer. For their part, GamePro went with a 4.5 out of 5, which is basically the same as the 9 out of 10 score that we saw from Australian magazine Hyper. Now, if you're looking for the highest score, then look no further than Nintendo Power. Giving it a perfect 5 out of 5, all 5 editors gushed about Mario Tennis. Andy argued that if you have the N64 version, then you have to get this Game Boy Color version. The two games complement each other very well. The play control is perfect, and the storyline really gets you into the game. Drew agreed, noting that fresh off the excellent Mario Golf effort, Camelot serves up another fantastic Game Boy Color sports game. All the RPG elements and lightning-quick gameplay you'd expect are there. And finally, Jenny makes a solid point. Most game players will appreciate Mario Tennis, even if they're not very fond of sports titles. You know, that's an important point to reiterate. Tennis games tend to transcend the usual sports fan. They're fast, they're fun, and they're easy to get into, even if you're one of those people who just can't stand watching the sport. Add Mario and his pals into the mix, and you have a must-play tennis game. This is yet another great addition to the Nintendo Switch Online library.
$30. $40. Quiet, please.
Love hurts. Mario Tennis rated E for everyone now on Game Boy Color. Get into it.
After seeing the success of Tetris, you can't blame Nintendo for wanting to go back to that well and fish out another puzzle game. At the same time, the company was still a little wary about the genre, worried that maybe everybody's obsession with falling blocks was just a fad. The result was Dr. Mario, a puzzle game that used a popular Nintendo character to sell people on the simple concept, something they would continue to do time and time and time again. Instead of clearing lines with falling shapes, the goal here is to match unique shades using falling pill capsules. See? Totally different. This is one of those beloved classics that a lot of people have nostalgia for, so let's just go ahead and start with the highest scores. This includes Mean Machines, who ended up giving Dr. Mario a score of 87% in their 5th issue. Matt called it a good game. Its playing style is very addictive and will have you coming back for more over quite a period of time. My biggest gripe is that if you've already got Tetris, and virtually all Game Boy owners have, this holds very little extra in comparison. It's also not as good as the Soviet Wonder, so if you want another great puzzle game on the Game Boy to supplement your Tetris, get Pipe Dream instead. As it turns out, most of the British press agreed with Mean Machines, with Nintendo Magazine System giving Dr. Mario a score of 88%. With a score of 81%, Rays also liked the game, though once again they recommended people buy Tetris instead. Two-player games on the Boy are always fun, but people with a UK Game Boy will already have Tetris, the original and still best puzzle game. From there, the scores really start to take a hit. For example, Nintendo Power may have plastered Dr. Mario all over their cover, but they gave the Game Boy version a 4.1 out of 5. Ace, on the other hand, kinda hated the game, using their ridiculous 1,000 point scale to give it a 510. They argued that it reeks of plagiarism, which wouldn't be so bad if only it was better than the original game it's modeled on. They concluded that it's a simple game idea and not one that works particularly well, I hasten to add. What you have here is Nintendo's favorite game character playing Nintendo's favorite game, and sadly, it just doesn't come close to either. And then there's Electronic Gaming Monthly, whose editors had real mixed feelings about the pill-pushing doctor. Martin gave the game a 6 out of 10, noting that Dr. Mario is Nintendo's attempt to clone columns for the Game Boy and soon the NES. Not only do you have to twirl pills into position a la Tetris, but you must also place them in rows to successfully eliminate the viruses. It's complicated in higher levels, but it is different. Steve, on the other hand, wasn't having any of that, giving it a 4 and saying, Dr. Mario is an annoyingly over-involved version of Tetris meets columns that takes a different approach and comes up way short. Sure, Nintendo has done the same old thing in a refreshing new way, but where's the fun? EGM gave Dr. Mario an average score of 5.75 out of 10. Look, no matter how good or bad the scores were, one thing is just painfully clear. Everybody agreed that Tetris was better than Dr. Mario, and for a lot of the critics, it wasn't even close. I know it's going to make me unpopular, but I find myself agreeing a lot with EGM and Ace. I've always felt that Dr. Mario was a huge step down from Tetris. But for those of you that love the game and have a lot of nostalgia for it, I'm genuinely happy that it's available on the Nintendo Switch.
Your sister gave you the mumps. Your brother gave you the flu. Your best friend gave you chicken pox. It's payback time with help from Dr. Mario. Go head-to-head on NES or link up on Game Boy. Then contaminate, exterminate, and spread the viruses. When you score, you infect your opponent. Make them sweat, run a fever, get the chills. Dr. Mario. With 2 players, it's germ warfare.
Can I play? Sure.
Hey, thanks for watching us break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this one every time Nintendo adds classic games to their online service. We have a whole playlist with pretty much every Nintendo Switch Online game covered. So give it a binge when, you have a full weekend to spare. Now, here's the question I have for you. What sport is Mario best at? Is it tennis, baseball, soccer, golf, racing, maybe basketball? Okay, maybe that's one too far. Nobody's gonna say basketball. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of EGM Ranks that was actually supposed to go live today. We'll also have a review of that Llamasoft compilation going live on Wednesday. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.